Good morning, everyone. This week's Parsha is the portion of Mishpatim in which the Torah lays out for us all the laws, the civil laws, judicial laws, laws that, as the Talmud tells us, the rabbis tell us that even if the Torah would not have been given, we would have learned these laws. From just living in society, we would have learned these laws and followed them. These are logical. Your intellect, your mind compels you to live according to these laws. For example, the laws of damages. If someone damages your property, that you have to pay him and how much you have to pay him. All these different laws. Today we will focus in on one specific law in this parsha, and you can find it in your Chumash in this particular Chumash on page 274. It's in Exodus chapter 21, verse 35. I'm going to read the verse, and then we will discuss it. You with me? It reads as follows. When a man's ox will push his fellow's ox which dies, they shall sell the living ox and divide its money, and the carcass too they shall divide. One more verse. Or if it was known that it was a goring ox from yesterday and the day before yesterday, but its owner did not guard it, he shall surely pay an ox in place of the ox, and the dead body shall be his. You understand what he's saying here? Mm-hmm. Let me explain. This is known as the law of the goring ox. It basically goes like this. If you own an ox, and in those days everyone owned, it was an agricultural society, everyone owned animals, domesticated animals, oxen and cows, to plow the field, to work on your field, and so on, for milk, and so cows for milk. So it was a very common thing that people owned such animals. But what happens if your ox went one day, ran loose, and gored another person's ox, and he killed the ox? Now the ox cost, let's say, for example, $1,000 to buy an ox. So what is the person's that owns the goring ox? Does he have to pay the damage of the others, the person's loss of $1,000?
Depends on whether it was a goring ox or not a goring ox.
Oh, so this law goes as stated in the Talmud is as follows: if if the ox is not known as a goring ox, it's like out of character for the ox to do it. It never did such a thing. And all of a sudden, one day, it just ran loose and it did it. It damaged someone else's ox. It gored him and it killed him. Killed the ox. So then, the owner of the ox is liable to pay only half of the damage. And the reason for this is because you can't say he's totally exempt. Because after all, it's his ox that damaged. But you can't make him responsible fully either because it is an accident. Kind of an accident. It's unexpected. It's not the nature of his ox to go and gore. It's not known to do that. So therefore, to expect him to have guarded it with that level of protection to make sure it doesn't do it is not. It's not the norm. So therefore, you say pay half. But what happens is the verse continues. If this ox is already known from yesterday and the day before, meaning it already gored twice, that means it has a history of goring and damaging.
How do they decide that?
If it gored?
But how do they know it was that ox and not,
no,
they all look the same?
You have a good point.
It's the honor system?
I'll tell you in a minute. If it's known that this is a goring ox, that means that it already has a history of at least twice that it gored. So the third time, it becomes what's called in the language of the Talmud, a muad. A muad means that it is a goring ox, meaning it's kind of developed this nature, and you can expect it to run wild and loose and do these things, and therefore you should have protected it and put a greater eye on it, and if you didn't, you have to pay the full damage. How do you know this? So the law is like this. The verse earlier, when it talks about the ox that gores, mentions an interesting detail with regard to this law, and says that when the ox gores, you have to warn the husband. Not the husband, I mean the owner. You have to warn the owner in court. Witnesses have to come to the owner and tell him your ox gored, and it also has to tell him. Also in court, you have to, the witnesses have to come and warn him in court in front of the judge and say your ox gored, and be careful. One time and a second time. If it happens a third time and it's done, it becomes a goring ox, and now he's responsible for full damage if it goes and gores and kills and damages. That's the law of the ox. Now, the question is, if I own an ox, and this makes sense, but it's a logical law. I mean, it's I believe that, I'm not sure if in today's system of law, in the court systems, they would rule this in this same fashion, because I think today a person is considered, if your animal damages, I don't know the law in our system, if your dog goes and bites, God forbid, and damages, are you responsible the first time for full damages?
If your dog bites someone?
Yeah.
For no reason?
That's unexpected. You didn't know. It has a history of being a tame animal, and it ran wild one day, and it went and did this.
They have these on TV all the time. You're fully responsible.
You're fully responsible. So the Torah tells you you get two chances to pay half price,
Harry
half the
probably
damage.
knows he's an expert.
To pay half
Dogs.
the damage.
Dogs.
And the logic is that the person did not know and couldn't have expected this. And if you can't expect it, then how could you hold him responsible? Responsibility is exactly that. If you did something negligent, then you are responsible to pay. If you did nothing negligent, then you're not responsible to pay. And if an ox is not naturally if it doesn't have that history, so then you weren't negligent. I mean, it's not like you let it run wild anyway, but it did go crazy one day. So are you responsible? It's nothing you could have done. You did the maximum you could have done. But if you know that it has such a history, then you have an obligation to go an extra step, the extra step in protecting it. And then it's already, you should keep it away from people, you should keep it away from other animals if it has a history. But before it has a history, that can't be expected from you. So that's the logic of this law, and it makes perfect sense. The question becomes, what happens? Could this ox ever change its nature back to becoming a tame animal? Now, let's say the ox gored a few times, and 10 years pass and didn't gore again. So forever and ever, this ox is going to be considered a goring ox.
Great question.
Does it ever happen? Could it happen that the ox should return and go back to its status as a tame ox? So the Talmud talks about two ways that this can happen. Two ways that this can happen. You work with the ox, meaning the ox shows that it changed its nature. You protect it, you walk with it between people, and you try your best to train it to become a little more tame. And if it became tame, and the sign for this is, Maimonides tells us the sign for this is that it can be around kids, and it doesn't harm them. If it's around kids and you can trust it, and it doesn't harm them anymore, then you know that it learned a new way, and it's returned to its tame nature, and you don't have to worry about it. And then if it gores again, it's all like brand new, and you get your first two chances again. That's one way. To work with the ox, to train it, to change its nature back to a tame ox. Another way is if you change owners. If the ox is now sold, or you gave it as a gift, or you sold it to a new owner, it reverts right away back to its original state as a tame ox. That's the law.
What if the seller told the guy, look, I'm selling you an ox that's a goring ox? What happens
He
then?
should tell him. He's
But
supposed to
it
tell
still
me.
reverts to the status
Yeah.
of a tame ox?
Yeah, it still
Wow.
reverts back to the status of a tame ox.
Jeez.
The reason for this is, there are two reasons given for this. You following? Yeah. The two reasons that are given for this is as follows. I mentioned to you earlier that one of the laws that an ox has to become, that is necessary for an ox to become, adapt the status of a goring ox, is if you warn the owner. You have to warn the owner. For example, let's say my ox gored once, tomorrow again, after tomorrow a third time. 10 times it gored, 10 days in a row. But no one ever came to tell me your ox gored. No one ever took me to court to warn me over there. You're only responsible for half the payment every time. Why? Because that's a biblical injunction, a biblical law that God wrote into the Torah. It's to be found in the verse earlier. If you really want to see it, it's in chapter 21, verse 29, where it says clearly it has to be, they had to warn the owner. You have to have warned its owner. But if you didn't warn its owner, and that's why that makes sense too, because if you didn't warn it, it doesn't know.
But how do they prove it's that ox? If, the guy has 20 oxes, right?
Yeah. He has to prove.
And he says that one never gored,
can
even
tell.
though it really did. How
If
do
you can tell.
identify it somehow?
If you can
Didn't they
identify.
brand animals back then? In other words, how do you know it's your ox in the first place when among oxen? Didn't they mark the animals?
No.
They usually do. No?
So, if the person is not warned, so then you cannot really hold him responsible. Okay? So now if you changed ownership, I took an ox, my ox, that gored who knows 10 times, and they warned me. But now I transfer the ownership to you, I sell you the ox. I tell you, this is a wild ox, keep it under control. And I went out and gored. Are you responsible for half payment or for full payment? The law is that you're responsible for only half payment. Why?
Didn't go to court.
Because this new owner did not get warned 3 times. And the law in the Torah is, the biblical law is clear, that you have to be warned you have to be warned those first few times until you can be held responsible for full payment. That's one reason.
They
If
must
you,
have been,
witnessed the goring, do you still have to be warned in court?
Who witnessed the goring?
The owner.
Yeah, he has to be warned.
Even though we saw the ox
they
gore?
must have
Because
done a
the
lot of
court-
swapping of oxen.
Because the court makes it more, you feel much more responsible when this has been brought
I
to a
understand
court,
what
and you're
you're
going to take greater precautions. Without that, this one didn't say, you can't, that's the law in the Torah.
I'm sure after second goring, they probably did a lot of swapping. They probably swapped back and forth to try to get around the law. No?
They weren't getting around the law. That's the law.
Yeah.
And here's the reason. I'll give you a second reason. That's one reason why, if you sell the ox, it returns back to status as a tame ox. And you're only responsible for half payment until it does it 3 times again, and you're warned 3 times the new owner. That's one reason, because the new owner did not get warned. The second reason is, another commentator that lived about 700-800 years ago, known as the Meiri, he explains as follows, that the reason why, when you change ownership, the ox goes back to its status as a tame ox, is because when you change ownership, the nature of the ox also changes. The new owner has new customs, he deals with the ox in a different way, he may protect it better. The ox develops a new character under a new owner. No, the earlier owner could have dealt with it one way, the second owner deals with it the second way. The ox becomes different. The nature of the ox changes. And therefore, you start all over again. It's like starting all over again. You can't apply the old nature to the new owner. Clear, right? So that's the law. Basically, to sum it up, if your ox gores once, twice, you're only liable to half payment. The third time, and you were warned properly in a court, third time, once it's 3 times, you have to pay full damage. Okay? Can it return back ever to its earlier status? There's 2 conditions. One is you train it, and you bring it back to its earliest state as a tame ox. And the sign for that is, if it now is hanging around people, even kids, and it is tame, it doesn't harm, then it's back to its old nature. Or you change ownership, and then for those two reasons, either because the new owner wasn't warned properly, or because under new ownership the ox changes. The ox changes its character, becomes a tame ox, and therefore it cannot be expected from the new owner to treat it as a goring ox. Now I want to discuss this law in its spiritual side. What has all this got to do with me and you? We don't own oxen. We don't have agriculture. We don't own fields anymore. Our oxes, we don't even have oxes. So this law of a goring ox, I don't know if anywhere in the world today this ever happens.
All the time.
It happens. I'm sure it does happen.
China and all
it
that,
happens,
they have
but
oxes.
in the Jewish world it's very seldom. But it could happen, obviously, it could happen. But it's more than that. There's obviously, in this law, like every law in the Torah, it has relevance and meaning for all times, for all people, even if you don't own an ox. It's got to have some spiritual meaning behind this that you and I can apply it in our life. What is an ox? A bull. So the Alter Rebbe in Tanya says, and this is based on Kabbalah, of course, that every Jew has two souls. Two neshamas, two souls. One is the animalistic soul, and one is the godly soul. The animalistic soul is called animal, is the animal soul. In the words of the Kabbalah and Hasidus, it's called the animal soul. Why is it called the animal soul? Because it's like an animal. What is an animal? It's very selfish, self-centered. It cares only about itself, and that's it. That's what the soul is. The human, animalistic soul is like an ox. And this ox has to be trained. What do you mean by train? You have to teach it. Not to gore. What does gore mean in the spiritual realm? To do sin. What happens when a yid does a sin? He damages the world. It's like an ox that gores and damages another person's property. When a yid sins, he's damaging, goring, and damaging God's property. That's what it is. When any human being sins. But when a yid sins, because he has a neshama, a godly soul, it's even more effective in the world. It makes a greater effect. So you have to train your animal, your ox, your animal soul, which is passionate, which is self-centered, to control it, not to damage, not to sin. And the truth of the matter is that a human, the Jewish animal soul, is not a bad soul. It's not a bad person. It's not by nature, it's not a negative. It's not looking to harm. It's not looking to sin. In fact, Alter Rebbe says that the nature of a Jewish animal soul, that first soul, which is the animal soul, it's not anti-God. It's not looking to go against what God wants. It's looking for one thing, myself. No matter what it is. If God wants, if it could be a godly soul, no problem. Its nature is to be self-centered. So a yid's nature, even his animal side, his animalistic soul, his ox, could be used in the service of God. It's not necessarily a negative soul that has to be broken and destroyed. You don't have to do away with that soul. You have to just train it properly. Now, what do we say about a regular ox? A regular ox nature, until it develops and the nature of a goring ox, it's a tame ox. Has the nature of being decent, not killing and not goring and not damaging. A yid's neshama also doesn't have within its, a yid's animal soul does not have within it the nature to go do sins. It has in its nature to be selfish, but not sin. Right? So therefore, when a yid does a sin, like an ox goes and gores. It goes against its nature. It does something crazy. It does something out of its character. A yid, when he sins, he's doing something out of his character. It's an ox, but it's doing something that's goring. It's not a normal behavior for an ox to do. It's not expected. When a yid sins, it's also not expected, but it could happen. So if it happens once, it's still a tame Jewish soul, animal soul. If it does it twice, you're still responsible only for 50%. But if it does it over and over and over, it can develop a nature to become a sinful soul. Develops a new nature to become a sinful. And then it becomes a muad, a goring ox. Your soul becomes a sinful ox. It keeps damaging. As I said before, when you sin, you're damaging. What do you do with such a situation? What do you do if you grew up and you did not keep your animal in check and it went around goring, it went around sinning? You allowed yourself to fall into sin. And you did it more than once, or more than twice, it became 3 times already. It became its nature, it becomes like a second nature. What happens when you sin? The first time a person sins, he's like, take a person, for example, that kept kosher his whole life. A young boy, a young girl that grew up in a religious environment, father and mother were both religious. They raised him, they raised her to keep kosher, to keep Shabbos, to do everything right, to put on tefillin every day. And then this young man decides for himself, he says, you know what, let me try the other world. I'm a little bored of Judaism. The first time that he takes something that's not kosher and puts it in his mouth is what's the word I'm looking for? It is a very, very traumatic experience. The first time he's shaking when he puts that non-kosher food in his mouth. It's very hard for him to do it. It's not easy for a person that put on tefillin for 20 years or 10 years and suddenly decides, I'm not going to do it anymore. That first day, they're not putting on tefillin, he's shaking by the end of the day. It's traumatic. When you violate Shabbos the first time in your life, it's a traumatic experience. But you did it once. I didn't die. I didn't lose my life. Nothing happened. At least visibly. Something terrible happened, but visibly you don't see anything that really changed in the world as a result. So you try the second time. The second time it got a little easier. You do it over and over and over and over, it becomes second nature. The sin becomes second nature, and to the point where you don't even realize that it's a sin anymore. It means nothing anymore to put something that's not kosher into your mouth. But that's the way it works. The first time you sin, it's a traumatic experience. You're afraid that some kind of lightning bolt's going to come and hit you, and you're going to disappear. Not figuratively, if you know what I mean. But as time goes by, it goes from being a tame ox, it goes to becoming a goring ox. The nature of this ox, of this animal soul, changes completely. And sin means nothing for it anymore. It's a muad. And you become responsible 100%. You made a mistake once, God doesn't, pay half the price, you pay half the damage. It's easier to do tshuva after one, but once it becomes second nature, it becomes a real big problem. So how do you change now back to your old nature? Just like in the law of the ox, in real life, when an ox gored more than 3 times. So we talked about 2 ways of it returning back to its original status as a tame ox, where you're only responsible for half the payment because it developed its original nature, which is to be tame. How does that work within your animalistic soul with sin? So what are the 2 ways we talked about when it comes to an ox? You have to train it. You have to train it. Training is not easy. It means that the training is, I'm still the owner, and even me as the owner, I'm not changing ownership. I'm the owner, I didn't sell it to anyone, but I can train the ox to become more tame. And if it strolls around little kids and it doesn't bother them, and they're safe, and there's no problem, it can be there alone without being watched, then it returned back to its original status. The same is with the human ox, with the Jewish ox. You have to train it. How do you train an ox? How do you train your Yetzer Hara? Your animal soul, it's not the Yetzer Hara exactly, it's the animal soul. The Yetzer Hara is evil. But your animal soul is not, your human animal soul is not evil. As I said before, it's not there to oppose God. It's there to serve self. Sometimes yourself can be very selfish and it can lead you into sin, but it doesn't have to. So how do you return it back to its original status as a sinless soul? Working with it, training it, breaking its nature. I'm going to give you examples for this. For example, if a person falls into a specific sin, he does it over and over and over and over. God forbid, I give you an example from the world that we live in. A drug addict, an alcoholic, someone that has an obsession with something. He's obsessed. He can't control himself. He wasn't born that way. He did it once. He tried marijuana. It wasn't bad. Tried it again. Then he started needing it. He went into bigger, more severe drugs, until he finds himself in a situation where he's a goring ox. He can't control himself. His nature changed. He's addicted. Some people are addicted to sin. So how do you train yourself when you have an obsession? You have to break that obsession. You have to stay away from it to the nth degree. The Rambam says that if someone has a bad nature of getting angry, for example, he gets angry too quick. He has a nature that he's a pleasure seeker. He seeks honor. Some people they seek honor. They want every honor that can come their way. They're there. They want honor. They like the status. They like the power that comes along with it. They like it. What the Rambam says, what you have to do is, if you're here, you have to bring yourself all the way back to the other side. You have to completely break yourself, to distance yourself from this obsession to the nth degree, and then once you broke yourself, you're no longer obsessed with it, then you can let it go back to halfway. It's like when you have a stick that's bent out of shape. What do? You don't bend it back till straight. You bend it the other way, then it automatically goes back to the middle, to being straight, right? If you're going to just bend it till being straight, it's going to be, it'll bend again a little bit to the other side. The Rambam says if you want to break an obsession, you have to completely go against it to the nth degree, pull it to the other extreme, and then go back to the middle. Because the Rambam says the best way to live is the middle road. It's not good to be extreme with most things. But if you're obsessed, then you have to go to the other extreme. And then, after all, so that's called changing the nature of the animal soul. Breaking it, working with it. It's not easy. That takes time, sometimes many, many years. What were you going to say?
Even if it's an unpleasant extreme, a negative extreme. Raz and I just happened to wander upon this yesterday in the Rambam. We were discussing this. If you're overly humble to the point where you're frozen in inactivity because you think that everything, he recommends that you become arrogant.
Not arrogant.
Arrogant. No, arrogant until such time as you can reach the neutral point and then go back.
Actually, the Rambam says with regard to the certain things that it's okay to be to the extreme.
Yeah.
I think one of them is being arrogant. So I'm not sure.
He's to correct
not
yourself.
arrogant, I'm saying the opposite
To correct
of arrogant,
yourself.
being humble.
Yeah.
But you may be right, but the point is the Rambam says he doesn't like extremes in anything. Judaism doesn't promote extremities.
Yeah.
Don't go around hungry all day because you're afraid that the eating is going to feed your ego. If you eat within proper measure, it's not going to feed your ego. You're going to be healthy. Other such things. Just be a pleasure seeker. So if you're extreme, that's all. You're obsessed with seeking pleasure. Whatever you eat is not enough. You're looking for more pleasure, more vacations, more. If that's your nature, you got to break it because you're not focused. You're going to be totally lost in that negative experience. So you have to break it to the other side. But then eventually, the Rambam, Judaism wants you to come back to the middle. But before you can come back to the middle, you got to work with that negative nature. The ox became a goring ox. It became a sinful beast. You have to work with it and change it. That's one way. The other way is by selling it, just like by the in real life, when you have a goring ox, how does it return back to its tame state? When you change its owner. How do you? What does it mean to change the owner
In your soul.
in your own soul, in the experience of your own animal soul? Changing owner. It's not the actual language of the Talmud regarding the change of ownership is shinui reshus. Shinui reshus means that now it's living in a new domain. It's not living in the old owner's domain, it's living in a new domain, and by a new owner, in a new place, in a new environment, in a new everything. Some people find it extremely difficult to change their nature. It's very hard to work with yourself, to break your nature, to break an obsession. There's another positive way to change who you are. And that is by focusing 100% on something new. What happens in obsession? You're thinking all day long about what you want, about what you like, about your obsession. What you have to do is get focused completely on something else. Throw yourself into a new lifestyle. It's a new environment. Get focused. Sell yourself, so to say, to holiness. Adapt and develop a new lifestyle. Forget about breaking yourself. It's one thing if you're dealing with breaking yourself and changing your nature from within. That's one way, and that's a difficult way. Another way is selling yourself into something better. What does that mean? Completely focus and develop a new lifestyle. You're obsessed with something. Start learning all day long. Not all day, but get involved in good things all day. Change the focus. The Rambam says in the laws of Teshuvah, it's like changing your name. So we know that on Rosh Hashanah we're judged, right? And Rosh Hashanah you're judged for all the past year's deeds. So what happens if God judged you, for example, for a negative outcome? You're guilty. And He judged you and said, this person needs to be punished this year, and the punishment is going to be that he's going to suffer with a lack of money. He's not going to have enough to provide his family. Let him struggle for a year as punishment. Are you doomed? Does that mean for that year you're going to struggle?
No.
It depends on you. It depends. The Rambam says something very interesting. He says, what you have to do is change who you are. Change your name. What does it mean, change your name? Just change your name and that's it? No, it's more than that. Change who you are. What does change who you are mean? I develop a new identity. Meaning, Rosh Hashanah, God judged this person. But if He changes his identity, becomes a new person, this new person wasn't judged. This person wasn't judged. That old person was judged. The old identity was judged. Now he sold himself into a new identity. What does it mean to sell yourself into a new identity? To completely refocus your life into something different, to something positive. Don't deal with the negative, with changing and breaking the negative. Because all day long you're going to be dealing with negative. That's not either a good thing all the time. To be involved in that. Change focus. I tell this to young people all the time. Psychologists tell this to young people all the time. You can't sit all day and delve into your negativity by trying to change it. Because after all, at the end of the day, you think, what did I do today? I was involved in all my negativity. What kind of a day is that? So yes, you're involved in trying to change that negativity, but it's still negativity. You're involved in something negative. That's not good for a soul. Much better is to try to shift your focus, sell your identity, develop a new identity. From now on, I'm looking to be involved in only good things. Automatically, you'll be sidetracked. You won't be focused on your obsessions. You won't be focused on your negativity. It's a much more effective way. It's one thing to try to train the ox again to become tame. It's a whole different experience. When you put him into a new ownership, it automatically changes his identity. Put yourself into a new focus. Transfer yourself into something different. And your identity will change. Change your name. What does change your name mean? Change focus. Develop a new lifestyle. So that your Yetzer Hara, when you are involved in some good things, when you sit and learn, does Yetzer Hara bother you? Here's the deal. When you're dealing with your obsession, you have an obsession for, let's say, ice cream. Person, he has an obsession for ice cream. He can't control himself. Every 10 minutes he wants another ice cream. Tastes good. He can't control himself. So what do? You tell this person there's two ways you can deal with it. Now I ask you, which is a better way? Here's the two ways. You tell a person, break that obsession. Every time you see an ice cream, say the ice cream is disgusting. Say the ice cream is no good for you. And work on yourself till you change the nature again, till you start hating ice cream. I ask you, when you are involved in that exercise, is the Yetzer Hara still involved in trying to get you to... Yeah. You're trying to fight it, the Yetzer Hara is trying to fight back. You're struggling with that obsession all day long. Even when you're trying to fight it. When you're trying to fight evil, you're fighting evil. You're involved with evil. You're getting your hands dirty. And there's a danger that the evil will overtake you again. Huh?
Nietzsche.
But when you change your identity, you sell yourself into a new identity, meaning you take on a new ownership, meaning you become owned. You sell yourself to God, to good things, to positive things. Don't deal with the ice cream, with the obsession. Don't think about ice cream all day. Think about helping poor people. Think about visiting people in the hospital. Think about learning Torah, davening, doing mitzvahs. Get focused on something positive. Is the Yetzer Hara going to keep bothering you about ice cream? You're not thinking about ice cream. You're not in that world. So the Yetzer Hara doesn't have the access to you with that obsession anymore. And you believe it or not, when you do that enough, you focus yourself on positive things, positive energy all the time, guess what happens over time? Your nature changes also. Your obsession for ice cream automatically goes away. Your obsessions disappear. So there's two ways to do it. One is to train the animal again, but that's a messy situation. Yetzer Hara is fighting with you and it's a struggle. Better yet, is sell yourself. Sell yourself to something new. Change your identity. Change your name. God, I'm not that person anymore. That person that you knew me yesterday is not me today. I am a new person. I sold myself. I belong to you. And over time, believe it or not, it happens where the nature begins to change. It's a much more effective way. And that happens immediately. How long does it take to train an animal? It takes a long time. How long does it take to sell an animal? And all of a sudden it's in a new environment that changes overnight. It's a very different experience. Much quicker, much cleaner, much more effective at the end of the day. You're not fighting evil all day long. Fighting evil is a mess. It's a war. You may win, you may lose. Even if you will win. Even if at the end of the day you won the war. But look what you were involved in all day long. With an enemy, with filth, with dirt, with obsession. Go do something positive. It's easier said than done. But that's the point. The point is, when you want to get a person to... I don't know what they do in these programs when people go for Alcoholics Anonymous or drug programs and things like that. People have serious... I don't know how the psychology of their training and what they do there. But there's no question that if they learned this, they would adapt some of these techniques. It would certainly work, and I'm sure they do. I have no doubt that they do. You cannot tell a person, fight your obsession all day long. You have to tell a person to sell yourself to become a new identity. It's not easy. You have to sell yourself completely. You have to really get focused on totally positive experiences. But it's so much more meaningful. And first of all, you're doing something positive. And at the same time, you're not giving into your obsessions. It may take longer in the sense of changing your nature. But over time it happens. But during that time, you're involved, you're focused on a whole new identity, a whole new experience. And so that's the point, that's the two laws of getting the ox to come back to its original state. This is the spiritual dynamic of it. But I mentioned to you earlier the quite literal law of the ox. That's the quite literal law. that you can either train the ox to change its nature
So,
or sell it. It's much more effective to sell. And tshuva, when a person wants to do tshuva for something, get focused on something positive. The Rebbe always used to tell people, when they came to us there, with these negative things, go do something positive. You'll automatically, you won't be involved in that mess. So now let's start doing that.
Good.
Yashakayach.
Ashikoah.
Okay.
No.